Hey, Miss Cameron. Thanks for allowing us to come in and talk with you today. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the moves that you've made to establish a classroom community with your fourth graders this year?
Yeah, I think that in order to have those conversations about the big topics, they have to feel comfortable with each other. They have to feel like the space is safe for them to be able to open up and to share their ideas and opinions. So we started very basic in the beginning of the year with simple things like, who are you as a person? What does your name mean? What's special to you? And we focused a lot on how we were unique and special and how we can respect each other for those special, unique character traits that we have. A lot of that came from literature. The Molly Lou Mellon book and the Do Unto Otters, and a lot of those simple, easy, basic level texts that allow them to pull out some of those simpler, complex ideas that they're able to, have the conversations about to begin with. And so once they kind of got to know each other as people, we moved to more complex topics that fit into other books and literature, wherever it fit in naturally. This is an election year, and so naturally that raised a lot of questions. Everyone has different beliefs at home. Everyone's families talk about different things, but they come to the classroom and they have those questions. And so, to focus on what they need and what they've come asking for, I think once you've established that beginning, that it's okay to talk about things, and in here it's respect, and that's how it's going to be. The way the community continues to develop comes with natural progression when you simply listen to them and when they know to listen to each other.
So it's really student-centered.
Correct.
And you create a space where all their voices are heard
Right.
and valued. And you brought up the election year, and I'm just wondering, using that as an example, how do you facilitate conversations around what could be controversial or difficult topics to discuss sometimes with adults, let alone children?
Right. I think it's really important for the teacher to be an objective, unbiased, but still communicator in the whole realm of things. So, I never want to impose my own ideas about, some of those more controversial topics. When I say my own ideas, I mean more, specific things. Like when we talked about the election, it's not important who I voted for. That's not the overarching idea of an election. So I think sometimes it's important to pull back from what might be the controversial part and look at a big picture. So instead of, for the election, getting caught up on who the candidates are and who's this and who's that and who's that, it's more important to see, why do we have an election, and to give them that background knowledge first. What is an election? How does it work? Who are these people? Start with the basic knowledge, and then at that point, go towards their questions, but at the same time, be careful to not impose my own ideas, but to let them talk and to lead them down roads of inclusivity and acceptance without forcing the idea on them. So with the election, we didn't talk about who the right candidate was or the big controversial issues, because they're not. They don't need to know about that. But what we did talk about is everyone has an opinion. It's okay to have an opinion. How do we respect each other's opinions? How are we similar despite the differing opinions that we have? Because at the end of the day, those overarching themes on the controversial topics are what they should be pulling out of them and what allows them to make their own opinions. And it's okay for them to have their own opinions, and I think that's something I've made very clear to them too. You're allowed to have your own opinion. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree with the person sitting beside you. You're entitled to what you feel is important, but we're going to respect each other for what that is.
Right. You talk about, I think what I'm hearing you say is really the essence of this is the common bond of humanity, that
Correct.
We're all people regardless of what your opinions are and what you believe. And you talked about the importance of inclusivity and diversity. And I know you've done a lot of work with using books as a springboard to facilitate some of these conversations where the kids are making connections with the characters or perhaps learning about people's lives in a new way.
Right.
So they're not necessarily connecting with their own lives, but seeing this books as kind of a window into another less familiar way of being, if you will. And then your students had lots of conversations and actually did some projects. So a couple of questions with that. One, can you talk a little bit about how you choose the books that you use? with your students, and then what kinds of things come up in these conversations and the projects that they engage in?
I think you have to listen to your kids, and you have to know them, and you have to know their hearts, and you have to know what they wonder and where they struggle, but also where they're strong. And so that's where I pulled my books from. You know, when the election came up, and a lot of my students struggled with, you know, I'm African American, and at the inauguration, no one looks like me, and that bothers me. You know, that's my cue to think, okay, that's on his heart, that bothers him. How do I give him a space to talk about that? What books can I pull at that point to give him some encouragement, to encourage those conversations so that in 20 years from now, the inauguration does represent other people other than, you know, just people that don't look like him. So I think I've listened first, and I've seen where they are, and I've seen what they're good at, and I know that a lot of them have very tender hearts, and they're aware of situations, but they're not sure how to handle them. So, you know, I originally, one of the main books we chose just to push them farther on this was The Separate is Never Equal. And I chose that because we had done a lot of work on the election with African Americans and white people, and we have done a lot of work with slavery simply because it's a social studies standards for fourth graders. But that book took them to a new level of thinking because they were already on that mindset, and I wanted them to expand from where they were. So I knew where they were, and I knew where I wanted them to go. So that book wasn't chosen intentionally because I wanted them there. When we started the book clubs, I pulled books that they didn't have experience with. You know, it's so easy for us to focus on things that, oh, they might know this, and they might have the background knowledge, but I think it's also important to consider what they don't know and how to be able to pull that in using what they do know. But at the same time, you have to know when they're ready. If I had tried to do this in August, it would have failed miserably because they weren't ready for that. It wasn't a pressing issue on their heart in that moment. And so I think to know where they are, where I want them to go, and who they are is how I've chosen the books.
And yeah, it sounds like it comes from the students first.
Right.
And I think also it'd be difficult to do this work in August because you really had to create that classroom culture that allowed students to feel safe and comfortable with asking these questions and having these different kinds of conversations. So you talked a little bit about the Separate is Never Equal book, and now I know you all are doing some book clubs so that they're having small group conversations in addition to the whole group conversations with the read-alouds. Can you talk a little bit about how perhaps some of the conversations or the connections or the new understandings that they are embracing might be leading them in an organic kind of way to taking action, to wanting to do something as a result of reading these books?
I think as teachers, it's really easy to be product driven because we know that's where we want our students to be. We know an outcome. And so I think when I first started this, I was so eager for them, you know, to get there and, you know, to understand because I knew they could do it. And I knew, oh, yes, we can share this. But with the book clubs, what I've simply done is I've just backed up and I've let them talk. And when they've talked, the prompting, without the prompting from me a lot of the times, has brought them to notice things on their own, which I think makes it way more meaningful to them. So an example of that is so we did the book clubs, but we also pull from each other's book clubs and we meet in little jigsaw groups so they can have experiences with other books as well. And so the book El Defo is about a little girl who has a hearing impairment. She wears cochlear implants. And a little boy who was not reading that book was listening, and he said, it makes sense. And I said, what makes sense? And he said, my reading buddy in first grade who I read to, I always had to wear a microphone, and I didn't understand that. And I saw those things in his ears, and I didn't know what they were. And now I'm understanding he has a hearing impairment, just like Cece does in the book. And so I could have prompted that from day one. Like, I knew that going into El Defo, that, you know, we have experience with that. But that didn't make sense, and it didn't become meaningful until he noticed it on his own. And so then after that he said, well, now I understand because she struggles in the book with misunderstanding people's words. And so now I understand why he's not talking to me when I read to him, because maybe he's not understanding what I'm saying. or maybe I need to talk louder. And so I watched as the next time we went into first grade reading buddies, he chose a different spot in the room. He moved to a quieter spot. He sat beside him instead of in front of him. You know, the changes that he made naturally based on what he had read there became meaningful because he made that connection on his own. And, you know, it's not necessarily a product in the sense that we think of as teachers, that's something that we can grade or that we can show to other people. No, but it is a product in a way that makes him a good person, and it makes him more aware of the world around him. And, you know, I think my goal as a teacher, yes, test scores are important, yes, grades are important, but at the end of the day, my job is to make good people and good citizens. And those are the things that are going to last and that are going to stay and that are going to make the world better, you know.
So wonderful. That's why we love you, Miss Cameron. So that leads me to another question. So, you know, you say it's not just about test scores, right? And I think a lot of times teachers feel this pressure that they have all of these standards that they have to quote unquote cover, and they have to prepare students for tests. So how do you do this work so that you're reframing your instructional blocks, the reading and writing workshop in this case, to integrate this work rather than it being an add-on?
And I know that there are going to be parents that have that same question. And where my thinking comes from is, so I give them tools in the beginning of the year, strategies to use, ways to read, ways to understand, and those are the tools that go in their toolbox. And ultimately, what they're asked to do on a test, what they're asked to do when they come to 5th grade, is to be able to take that toolbox and pull the tool they need to use. And so if I spend my whole year teaching strategy and not letting them use the toolbox, then they're not going to know how to use the toolbox. And so I think projects like this are great ways for them to have the tools, and they're ready at this point to use the toolbox and, you know, to be guided on their own where they need to be guided with the tool they need to be guided with. And so I think that reading and writing workshop easily becomes, here's my mini lesson on a strategy, now apply it, now we do it, now we move on. And there is so much power in that, but at the same time, there's also power in allowing them to use the tools on their own when they know they need to. I mean, can they make a prediction when I say, we're making a prediction today? Yes, but can they make a prediction about the way someone's going to treat someone else? Maybe not. And so do they really have that understanding of what a prediction is or what an inference is or any of those things if they don't know how to use it in context? So I don't think that people have to feel like this is something you add on. It's just, do we ask them to analyze text? Yes. Do I get to choose the text they analyze? Yes. So can I choose a book that has these same topics? Yes. Can we ask questions about this book? Yes. Can they be questions